The sleet started around 11, small and mean, ticking against the windshield of a 1987 Ford pickup as it rolled off Route 9 and into the halo of the only gas station still lit in Braxton Mill, Virginia. The pumps hummed under a sodiate that buzzed like a trapped wasp. The air smelled of diesel and fryer grease drifting from the shuttered diner next door, and underneath all of it, inside the cab, the smell of pipe tobacco and WD-40 that had soaked into the seats over 40 years and would never come out. The woman who climbed down from the driver's seat was 61 years old, wearing a grey hoodie under a canvas barn coat, work gloves shoved in one pocket. Her hair was pulled back plain. Her boots were her father's, one size too big, laced tight to compensate. She had buried him 9 days ago, and tonight she was driving his truck home, 300 miles alone, because he had asked her to, in a voicemail she still hadn't deleted. Her name was Camille Ashford. If you passed her at pump number 4, you would have guessed retired school teacher, maybe a nurse. You would have been wrong in a way that mattered. She fed her card into the reader, and it declined. She tried again. Declined. The screen said, "See attendant," and the attendant's booth was dark, and somewhere out on Route 9, a police cruiser slowed as it passed the station, brake lights flaring red in the sleet. And then it turned around. She noticed. She had spent her whole life noticing. She kept her hands visible on the pump handle and waited, because there was nothing else an innocent person was allowed to do. The cruiser eased in behind the truck at an angle, blocking it. The spotlight hit her full in the face, so bright she felt it as heat. The door opened, and Officer Derek Sloan stepped out, 38 years old, 12 years on the Braxton Mill force, hand already resting on his belt, like a man greeting an old habit. "Evening," he said. "That your truck?" "It is now," Camille said. "It was my father's. He passed last week. I'm driving it home to Alexandria." "Uh-huh." Sloan walked the length of the bed, slow, dragging his flashlight across the tarp, the toolbox, the coiled ratchet straps. "Got a report of a stolen F-150 out of Culpeper. Older model. Blue. This truck is brown, officer. Sleet makes colors funny." He came back around and put the flashlight beam directly on her face and held it there. "License and registration." She moved slowly, narrating every action before she made it, the way her father had taught her when she was 15, in a kitchen that smelled like coffee and fear. "My hand is going to my back pocket. The wallet is in my back pocket." She handed over her license. Then she leaned into the cab, retrieved the registration from the glove box, and handed him that, too. Sloan read it and smiled, and the smile was worse than the flashlight. "Registration says Ellis Ashford. You said your name's Camille. How was my father?" "The estate paperwork is in a folder on the passenger seat. Probate letter, death certificate, title transfer. You're welcome to look." "Oh, I bet there's a folder." He clicked the flashlight off and on against his palm, off and on. "You know what I've learned in 12 years? You people always got a folder, always got a story, always got a cousin, always got a dead daddy." He tossed the license onto the hood, where the sleet started collecting on it. "That's a working man's truck. So help me understand how a woman like you ends up driving a working man's truck through my town at midnight." Camille felt the cold get into her chest, and it wasn't the weather. She kept her voice level, each word set down carefully, like china. "Officer Sloan," she said, reading his nameplate. "I've answered your questions. My documents are in order. I'd like to pay for my gas and be on my way." "You'd like?" He laughed once, no humor in it. "Turn around." Hands on the hood. Am I being detained? On what suspicion? On the suspicion that I said so. He grabbed her elbow and spun her, and her hip caught the fender hard enough to bruise, and the sleet on the hood soaked through her sleeves immediately, shockingly cold. She heard the second cruiser arrive, heard a younger voice, female, uncertain. Sloan, dispatch says the Culpeper truck got recovered 2 hours ago. It's back with the owner. Then she's driving some other stolen truck, Pruitt. Run the plate. Officer Dinah Pruitt, 11 months out of the academy, stood in the sleet holding her hat and did not run the plate right away. She was looking at the woman bent over the hood. She was frowning like someone hearing a song she couldn't name. The cuffs went on tight. Camille inhaled through her nose and said quietly, "The cuffs are cutting off circulation to my left hand." And here is the strange thing, the thing that would come out later in the federal courtroom, and that nobody, including Derek Sloan, could ever fully explain. He loosened them. One click, automatic, almost gentle. The way you'd fix a kid's backpack strap, because somewhere under 12 years of rot, there was still the rookie who'd memorized the manual. Then he heard himself doing it, and hated it, and got meaner to bury it. You want comfortable. You shouldn't have stolen a truck. He marched her toward his cruiser. Gravel's slick, fall down, and that's a resisting charge. She looked at the gravel. Later, in the only public statement she ever made about that night, that was the detail she chose. Not the cuffs. The gravel. He folded her into the back seat and slammed the door. And through the glass, she said one more thing. Calm as still water. Officer, my phone is on the passenger seat of that truck, and in about 4 minutes, it's going to ring. You should decide before it does who you want to be when they get here. Sloan snorted. When who gets here? Your lawyer? No, Camille Ashford said. Mine drives Suburbans. The phone rang in 3 minutes, not 4. Pruitt was the one standing near the truck when it lit up on the passenger seat, buzzing against the vinyl. She leaned in with her flashlight, just to log it, and read the caller ID through the window, and her stomach dropped through the wet gravel and kept going. The screen said, Marshall, SCOTUS Security Detail, missed check-in, Sloan. Her voice cracked. She said it again. Sloan. What? SCOTUS. That means Supreme Court. Her phone says Supreme Court. It means she's got a contact saved. I could save a contact called the Pope. But Pruitt was already pulling out her own phone, hands shaking, typing the name off the license into the search bar. Because 11 months ago at the academy, an instructor had made them listen to a recording of an oral argument, a famous one, a voice measured and precise, setting each word down carefully, like china. And she had been standing in the sleet for 10 minutes, trying to remember where she'd heard this woman's voice before. The search results loaded. The photograph loaded. Robe. Marble columns. The official portrait. Pruitt turned her phone around and held it up, and her arm was trembling. Derek, she said, and she had never once called him Derek. That is Associate Justice Camille Ashford of the Supreme Court of the United States. You have a sitting Supreme Court justice handcuffed in the back of your car. The sleet ticked against the pumps. The sodium light buzzed. Derek Sloan looked at the phone, and then at the cruiser, and the narration of his face would have gone like this. First the smirk, holding its position out of habit. Then the smirk losing structural integrity. Then the color leaving him from the forehead down, like paint draining out of a figure, until he was standing in the cold, the exact shade of the sleet. That's, he said. No, that's a look-alike. That's. The phone on the truck seat rang again. Then Pruitt's radio crackled, and dispatch came through in a tone dispatch had never used before, high and clipped. All units be advised. We have federal agents inbound to your location, U.S. Marshals Service, and Supreme Court Police. ETA, 6 minutes. They are tracking a protectee's phone. Sloan, please tell me you did not. 6 minutes. Sloan stood in the parking lot, doing the math of his entire life. He thought about the license he'd tossed on the hood, now sitting in a small drift of sleet. He walked over and picked it up and dried it on his jacket, absurdly, uselessly. A man polishing the doorknob of a burning house. "Get her out," he said. "Get the cuffs off. We can explain. It was a good faith stop. The truck matched." "The truck was recovered 2 hours ago," Pruitt said. "I told you, it's on the log. It's time-stamped." Everything, from this point on, was time-stamped. The Suburbans came in low and fast. 3 of them. Black, throwing curtains of grey slush, and they did not park so much as occupy. Doors opened in unison. The men and women who got out wore soft-shell jackets over armor, and they moved with a kind of economy that made the 2 local officers look like they were underwater. The lead agent was a broad, grey-templed man whose credentials read U.S. Marshals Service, Judicial Security Division, and he took in the scene. The blocked truck, the cruiser, the face in the cruiser's back window, in about 1.5 seconds. "Weapons stay holstered, hands stay visible," he said, not loud, and it landed like a dropped engine block. "Officer, keys, now." Sloan's hand shook so badly it took him 2 tries to get the door open. Justice Camille Ash stepped out of the back of the cruiser, with sleet melting in her hair and red rings around her wrists, and the lead agent turned her hands over gently, examining the marks, and photographed them with his phone, right there, flash popping in the dark. Evidence. Everything was evidence now. "Ma'am, are you injured?" "My hip took the fender. My hands are cold." She flexed her fingers. "I'm all right, Marcus. You missed check-in by 19 minutes. You scared my whole shift." "I was detained," she said, and let the word sit there in the parking lot, with all its legal weight, and every federal agent present looked at Derek Sloan at the same time, and Derek Sloan discovered what it felt like to be the only suspicious person at a traffic stop. "Sir, I need to explain," Sloan started. "We had a report of a stolen. Recovered at 21:47 hours, said an agent by the 2nd Suburban, reading off a tablet. 2 hours and change before you initiated. Your dispatch log already came through. So did the gas station's camera." She pointed her chin at the pump canopy, at the small, dark dome Sloan had stood directly beneath for 22 minutes. "Audio 2. Newer system. Audio 2. Sloan heard his own voice playing back in his head. "You people always got a story, a woman like you." He felt his knees do something unreliable. The chief of the Braxton Mill Police Department arrived 11 minutes later in a personal vehicle with his pajama collar sticking out from under his coat. And what he did in the parking lot was not a conversation. It was a surrender. "Yes, sir. Full cooperation, sir. Effective immediately, sir." He turned to Sloan and held out his hand, and for one confused second, Sloan thought his chief wanted to shake it. "Badge and weapon, Derek. The unhooking of a duty belt is a loud thing in a quiet parking lot. The Velcro, the snaps, the metal." Sloan handed over the badge he had carried for 12 years, and the chief passed it to a marshal who dropped it into a labeled evidence bag, and the sound of that zip seal closing was the loudest sound of the entire night. "Hands on the hood, please," the lead agent said. "You're not under arrest at this moment. You are being detained pending a federal civil rights review. Gravel's slick. Watch your footing." Sloan put his hands on the hood of his own cruiser, and the sleet soaked through his sleeves immediately, shockingly cold. Justice Ashford watched. She did not smile. People always expect the smile, and the absence of it was somehow heavier. She retrieved her father's registration from where it had fallen, dried it against her coat, and put it back in the glove box herself. Then she asked the marshals for 1 minute, walked over to Officer Dana Pruitt, who was standing rigid and grey by her cruiser, and said, "You knew my voice." "Yes, ma'am. The Whitfield descent. They played it at the academy." "You said his first name," the justice said, "when you stopped him. That's the part they can't teach." She looked at the young officer a moment longer. "Write your report tonight, while it's fresh. Write it exactly as it happened. That document will matter more than you know." It did. 11 days later, the Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division, opened a formal investigation into Officer Derek Sloan under Title 18, United States Code, Section 242, Deprivation of Rights under Color of Law, and Officer Pruitt's report, 4 pages, time-stamped, unflinching, was Exhibit C. The gas station audio was Exhibit A. In it, a federal jury heard a decorated officer tell a sitting Supreme Court justice, "You people always got a dead daddy," 9 days after her father's funeral. The DOJ did not stop with Sloan. Investigators pulled 12 years of records from a department of 22 officers and found 14 prior complaints against him, 11 from black motorists, 0 sustained, most never even logged past a supervisor's desk drawer. That pattern triggered a full pattern or practice investigation of the Braxton Mill Police Department. Within a year, the town of 9,000 people signed a federal consent decree, mandatory body cameras on every officer, an outside auditor reviewing every traffic stop for 5 years, a civilian complaint board with subpoena power, retraining for the entire force. The chief, who had let 14 complaints evaporate, resigned before he could be removed. 2 supervisors were terminated for falsifying the complaint log. The town's insurance pool settled the civil suit for $4.6 million. Justice Ashford's attorneys had one unusual condition, and they would not close without it. $3.1 million of it went into a trust that pays for dashcam and body camera systems in small rural departments that claim they cannot afford them, and funds a legal clinic that takes profiling cases for free, forever. Named not for her, but for Ellis Ashford, a mill mechanic who taught his daughter to narrate her hands. Derek Sloan was convicted on the federal charge in March. 30 months. At sentencing, he did not give the speech his lawyer wrote. He stood up, looked at the back of the courtroom, where his ex-wife sat with their 14-year-old daughter, and said only, "I loosened the cuffs 1 click. I keep thinking about why I knew to do that." Then he sat down. The judge gave him the 30 months anyway. Outside the courthouse, before the marshals took him, he asked the transporting agent for 1 phone call, and the agent, who had daughters, allowed it, and Derek Sloan stood on the steps in a suit that no longer fit and told his kid the verdict himself in his own voice, so she would not read it first on her phone at school. It was the last decent thing he got to do as a free man, and it counted for exactly as much as it counted for. Justice Ashford declined every interview. 60 minutes, twice. She gave 1 statement, 90 seconds, on the steps of a courthouse in Virginia, and the line that ran in every headline was this: "For 22 minutes on Route 9, I was not a justice. I was a black woman, handcuffed in the sleet, doing math about gravel, about whether falling down would become a charge against me. Everything I am was in that truck's glove box, and it did not protect me. The law is only real if it is real at that gas station at midnight for a woman whose card got declined. That is the whole job. There is no other job. Then she went home. In April, when the weather finally turned, she took a Saturday morning and backed her father's truck out of the garage in Alexandria to wash it. Steam came up off the hood in the early sun. She wore the barn coat and his boots, one size too big, laced tight. When she finished, she opened the glove box to put away the receipt from the car wash, and there they were, the two registrations, the old one in her father's careful block printing, Ellis J. Ashford, and the new one in hers. She had never removed his. She clipped hers on top of it so that his name still showed along the bottom edge, a half-inch of him, riding along. She sat there a minute with the door open, one boot on the running board, the cab smelling of pipe tobacco and WD-40, and now, faintly, of soap. Down the street, a neighbor's kid was learning to ride a bike, wobbling, correcting. Camille Ashford watched until the kid made it to the corner, then pulled the door shut, turned the key, and let the old engine talk to itself for a while before she drove.